Yes. And if you were with us last time, I made that joke, seeing Joan and me side by side. Joan is my mother, for those that were not here last time.
Yep. It's an honor.
All right, it's 5 after. Joan, you ready?
I am
Shall we
ready as I'm going to be. Yep.
Okay. All right, well, let's get started. Again, welcome everybody. Welcome those back from last week, and I think we've got a much larger crowd, so welcome again to the folks that are joining us for the first time this week. Glad to be able to put this together quickly to bring everybody together. I think that based upon Governor Baker's announcement on Monday, that maybe there's a few questions that people have. We certainly do. We certainly do. So we don't have all the answers yet. We're going to get them piece by piece, but we'll give an update on where things stand. The process for today, similar to last week, is Joan and I have a number of questions that we've received on your registrations, that we've received over the weeks by email and phone calls with the whole community here. So we're going to address those, give you an update on what we know, what are some of the open questions, and then hopefully take some questions from the chat. I think that's going to be the best process to do this for right now. Just, I think with such a large group, unmuting or raising the hand. For right now, we're not going to do that process, but please do enter your questions into the chat, and we'll do our best to monitor those, answer those during the flow of the meeting, and anything that we cannot get to, again, given the size, we will address offline. And as you know, we will be constantly updating our blogs with information. We'll be sending out our emails when there's a major announcement. So we'll keep everybody up to date on anything that we may have missed, or of course, if there's any other breaking news. In terms of, there are some other questions, just want to also shout out to the Facebook group. There's a Facebook group that many of you are members in. There's been great discussions in, it's called the Vacation Rentals Owner Community for Cape Cod and Islands. Many of you have already joined, and that's a great place for questions when you're asking more of an opinion on what are homeowners doing about X, where are they finding this, and you're going to see a lot of great discussions in that community Facebook group. So if you haven't seen it, we'll send it out, a link out in a follow-up email if you would like to get that. So with that, let's get started on the core of this meeting. The first thing I do want to talk about, just because there's been a lot of just anxiety over what these rules and regulations are going to be, I'm going to start out with a little bit of positivity on the numbers. What are we looking at forecast-wise? What are we looking at activity-wise from the vacationer's point of view? Because I don't want to jump into the regulations right off the bat. I think it's good to see. What I'm going to do here is share my screen for a second. I only have 2 slides to show here, but what I wanted to show was that there was a lot of activity. We talked about this last week, where we saw a bump in activity during the month of May, and ever since Baker's announcement, it actually has continued to go up. And so we have, I could go to the next slide. What we've seen is a chart like this. This shows us from January, it shows you the dip that occurred in March when things really hit the bottom. And then it shows you, look at the month of May and really look at how things have taken off. And we're really amazed by the traffic already. Even with the vacation rental ban still in place, we're seeing that over the last couple of days, you know, the numbers that we hit on the number of vacationers has been higher than any day in our 21-year history. So it's quite remarkable to see, but it really does show that there's a demand and there's an interest in the vacation rentals. There's a demand from vacationers to, you know, get away. They've been locked in their homes. They want to get away. What better place to find than a drivable distance? They're not about to jump on an airplane right now. They're going to be planning to get away. And obviously the Cape and the islands are very desirable for that reason. The other factor in this is the book direct movement. and many of you are familiar just kind of using that term, is the ability for vacationers. It's no more important today that vacationers are able to connect with you, the homeowners, on their questions, their concerns, and the ability to book direct, the ability to have a direct communication over email or over phone is very important to them, just as it is important to you. So that's another reason why we're seeing a lot of new vacationers come to the site, is to be able to address their concerns that they may have. And then the other, of course, is what we've always talked about, is the avoidance of booking fees on a platform like ours, like the We Need a Vacation platform. You get to avoid the fees. The other area, just to show you one last chart, is the monthly searches. These are, when I say monthly searches, these are searches for long-term stays. So we've talked about the increase in long-term bookings, and people are looking, those are the bookings that are permitted today. And it's not to say that there are more monthly searchers now than weekly. That's still, the weekly search is still the far and away the more popular. But for those, and Joan will talk about this, these are the searches that have really shown a big boost over the last couple months, or not that, over the last month. So just to show that, it shows that the interest is there and gives us a positive outlook should the rental ban be lifted, that our expectation is that you're going to see that interest continue to remain strong. And so the potential to regain that summer season for those that have availability, the potential is definitely going to be there. So with that, what I'd like to do, Joan, say hi to everybody.
Hello, welcome everyone.
Have you stopped receiving all the phone calls? We actually pull you away from the phones. Have you stopped ringing?
I hear it ringing in the other room like crazy, but we'll have to get back to those people later.
So this gives us an opportunity just to, address the major concerns that people have all at once. So Joan, why don't you give us an update on kind of a summary of Governor Baker's announcements and where things stand?
Sure. Well, as most of you know at this point, on Monday, Governor Baker released his, spoke about his 4-phase plan, and vacation rental homes are not in phase 1. Phase 1 started on Monday, and each phase, according to the governor, will last for at least 3 weeks. So 3 weeks from Monday is Monday, June 8th. So we are assuming that unless something happens, there's a resurgence of virus cases, we're assuming that it may be a go on June 8th. And I know that that's disconcerting because it's not definitive, but it's what we have to work with. So until then, no short-term rentals are permitted unless it's to house essential workers. And there aren't very many of those that need to go to the Cape for that reason and be housed. The other exception, of course, are the 32-day and plus rentals that Jim alluded to. There are a lot of people who, as we said, I think we mentioned last week, many people are home working from their home. As long as they have internet, they can work from anywhere. They have children out of school who could learn from anywhere. Many camps are closed for the summer. So there are many people who for a week would just be a tease, and they would love to come for more than just a week. Many can't, of course, and so they'll make do with just a week's vacation. But for those who want to get away, that's some of the reasons that we are seeing this huge uptick in the long-term rentals. And many of you have told us that you've gotten these rental commitments for 32 days. And just remember that, first of all, they're not banned because it's not a short-term rental if it's 32 days or more. And second of all, there's no lodging tax. So that's a huge savings for the vacationer. The other thing is we have a lot of questions about the 14-day minimum stay, and that's been in force since since March, and that hasn't changed. There's still we made a mistake the other day when we said that it was required. If you come into Massachusetts from out of state, you are urged, not required, to self-quarantine for 14 days. But there are a lot of homeowners who want to come from out of state to come to their home to get it ready for the summer, and they should feel free to do that. But just, keep in mind that there is that recommendation in place for the quarantine. The other thing is that we're not sure that 14-day quarantine will be gone by June 8th. It is possible, I don't think it will happen, but it is possible that the governor would want to ease into the summer vacation rental activity more slowly, and he could possibly extend it till the end of the month, but I don't think that will happen.
But our understanding, or just our look at this, our view at this, is that a 14-day quarantine for out of state, while also lifting the short-term rental ban, is a very difficult thing to have both of those in place. They don't work well together. You can't say, okay, you can now accept renters. And these rules will also likely apply to just accommodations in general. And so to say that you can allow for rentals for 1, 2, 3 nights a week, but you have a 14-day quarantine, those just don't go hand in hand. So it's, we're not saying that it's going to, that we don't know for sure, but the likelihood that would happen is not very high.
Right.
So, right. And I think the key is that it's right now, it's urging vacationers or visitors, and any visitors, it could be, yourself, homeowners here, that have to do a 14-day quarantine today, and we'll see if that gets lifted along with the rental ban on June 8th.
Right. Another question that a lot of homeowners are getting from their guests are about the beaches, and most of the beaches have been open all along, but some of them have been closed for a while, and the opening date for beaches is set for May 25th, next week. There are some restrictions, and it's advised that you check with your town. I mean, we will be doing some of that too, but it's really hard to keep up with it all. But there will be some restrictions placed on parking, and already in place are some rules about 12 feet between blankets and towels on the beach, and no organized games. And at least in phase 1, the facilities, some of the, like the changing rooms, etc., will be closed. Hopefully that will be open by
I think there are going to be a lot of specific town-by-town restrictions on the beaches. I think that we've already seen them floated out there. Not everything's been voted on. So unfortunately, it's hard to say there's going to be this specific beach-related rules. Certainly social distancing rules will be enforced, but town by town, they may have different rules for parking and stickers and everything like that. I think we'll compile some resources available, but certainly don't have all those answers right now until the towns make those decisions. Joan, I do want to get back to, just to clarify, I saw a couple chats in here in terms of, as of now, obviously the rentals are banned, but June 8th, what if you have a rental crossing the June 8th window? So basically, when can you start accepting a tenant, assuming it gets lifted June 8th?
When can you start? When can a tenant come into your home?
I saw a question in here that they have a tenant that crosses over the June 8th. So I assume they can't start until June 8th if it gets lifted. And that is, of course, if it gets lifted on June 8th.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine that the governor would announce an opening prior to June 8th. But it might only be a week before. We don't know. So that's why those early weeks in June are a little bit problematic, because we're just not sure what the guidelines are going to be or the rules.
So you're anticipating that that we'll hear more before June 8th, unlike this last announcement on May 18th, where we didn't know anything until the day it was announced when Baker announced it. What additional guidance do you expect, and when? What's the latest with the who's making the next decisions that are going to impact the lodging rules here?
Yeah. Well, there's the Reopening Cape Cod Task Force, of which we've been members, headed by Ryan Castle, who's the CEO of the Cape and Islands Association of Realtors. And then there's a Restaurant and Hospitality Advisory Task Force that they're meeting, and they're establishing some guidelines. And so these groups are submitting these guidelines to the Governor's Advisory Board, who will take it and then make their decisions based on what they've received from them. That's, I think that what we will hear beyond just the opening date will be perhaps some cleaning guidelines. And, that's a subject unto itself.
Right. So that was kind of the big question. I think there's a lot of uncertainty. Understandably, when Governor Baker announced the reopening phases, the most detailed was phase 1. And phase 2, we were hoping for a lot more information, especially as it comes to accommodations. We were hoping for a lot more information. It's taking time to get there. So the guidelines that we see right now say that with the opening currently at June 8th, it's going to be with restrictions. And that leaves it kind of vague, right? So, and that's been a common question. What sort of restrictions are there going to be when it opens, if it opens on June 8th? So what sort of things have we been discussing that might be part of that? You just mentioned the cleaning.
Well, one of the key questions is, will there be a restriction on the number of hours or time frame between tenancies? We think that there might be a 6-hour window required. We're not sure, but we doubt very much that there's going to be 24 hours or 72 hours that some organizations are recommending. Sure, it would be ideal if everyone could wait a day before welcoming the next guest, but with the rentals in place, and many of our homeowners have, at least some, if not many, weeks already booked. So they would have to scurry around and work with those those guests to have them come in late or leave early. And we don't think that is going to be part of the plan.
What about the gathering limits of 10 people?
That's a big question, and we've been asking people who we thought would know, and it's unclear. Right now, there is, at least on the beaches, no more than 10 people gathering. But what about the homes that accommodate 12, 14 people, the larger homes? We would love to know if those are allowed. It's a drastic change if suddenly they're saying, okay, in homes you can only have no more than 10 people. Again, I don't think that will happen, but these days.
Right. The part of the phased plan shows phase 2. It says under the gathering limits, it said to be determined based upon trends. So I think unfortunately for us, we don't know the answer to that, but the government's leaving themselves open to be able to make that call. And all we can do on that is, again, just we'll work with the committees, try to reach out to them and try to get an answer as soon as possible on that one.
Yeah, and I think if, in terms of the turnover time between your guests, if you have lots of weeks open, I would, you might want to establish a 6-night rental or even an 8 or 9 days, and then have just a few a day or so in between. It certainly is not the normal schedule, and it can't always be done because of cleaning, turnover cleaning services, etc. But for those who can arrange it, it might make everyone more comfortable.
You think towns would implement any additional restrictions on top of what comes out from the guidelines?
That is, from everything that has been suggested in the Board of Realtors, their number one goal in this is to have consistency so that one town doesn't establish a rule about the minimum stay and the next town has a different one. It would be sheer chaos. So they are strongly advocating for a consistent ruling on that kind of thing.
All right, well, hopefully we will get some words from these subcommittees, certainly before June 8th. We'll pay attention. I wouldn't expect anything until after Memorial Day, and they see how things are on Memorial Day and how the numbers are for just health numbers. What about on the financial side of things? What sort of recommendations do you have for people taking their final payment? Any sort of adjustments on timing for that, given things are in flux still?
Most homeowners require the final balance to be paid a month prior to tenancy. That could still exist for July and August, but there are many homeowners who are just postponing that and telling their guests to just wait until the final word is in. Certainly don't spend it. You may have to give it back especially if you have a June rental and the ban is delayed.
I want to move on to a very common question that has come up is liability clause. And what do you recommend for the liability? People have been asking about the lease. What sort of liability clause do we have to recommend here?
Well, for those of you who have our sample lease, our old lease prior to this year, just had the word health in it, and what it said was that it basically indemnified the homeowner if there was a health issue that arose during the tenancy or after. And we've simply inserted the words including viruses in there. And you can get the wording for that from our blog post about cleaning, which you can find in your homeowner center. When you log into your homeowner center, you'll see it right away, the orange box, and it says COVID-19 latest info, and there's all kinds of updates and blog posts in there.
What about
or you can just ask us for it.
Yeah, I think we were mistaken not to send that out in the last iteration through for last week's meeting, but we'll supply a link with the video follow-up as well to this, a link to any references that come up today. What about, so you talked about the liability clause in the lease. What about if you already have signed leases? What do you recommend? Do you recommend an addendum if you don't have a liability clause?
Well, I think when you reach out, I wouldn't do a separate one, I think, but when you reach out to your guests in general, and people should be doing that soon if they haven't already, with reassurance, you could also, if you wanted to mention it in there and have them sign something if you didn't have any kind of a clause like that in your lease. But I don't think I would recommend just sending that out. It just makes it seem a little perhaps self-serving,
Sure. So I mean, I think it's important transition here before getting into any sort of the specifics on, say, cleaning, which I know there's a ton of questions on, you mentioned the communication and the communication, the importance of the communication. Just sending out an addendum to the lease, obviously, it's just, it doesn't have any sort of verbiage with it, and just understanding of the current situation. You have to be talking to your guests and understand what their needs are, and reassurance is another word you said. So talk about just the importance of the communications at this time, and what do you recommend homeowners be communicating with their guests that have already booked and potential ones upcoming?
That's really the highest priority right now. I think many homeowners have already reached out to their guests especially those who booked long before COVID-19 was a reality. And even after that, it's so important to reach out to them, to acknowledge their fears, which they probably have. And, so many vacationers are really just dying to get away and out of their house, and they really want to take a vacation, but they're going to have certain qualms about it too. And just the uncertainty of, for many people, this will be the first house that they go into besides their own. Many of them have been inside their own home for months, and so there's that anxiety that goes along with that. We, just as an example, I heard from one of our homeowners yesterday afternoon. Michael, I know you're out there. He wrote an email to all of his guests. He was concerned about whether he could prepare his home sufficiently. And he was even to the extent that he was thinking of canceling the summer and returning everyone's deposits. But he bit the bullet and wrote them a very nice long email explaining what he was doing, what he was going to do, what, the cleaning procedures, what stepped up measures he was going to take, and his turnover cleaners were going to take, and just addressing what he would determine to be their concerns about all of this. And he also gave them an out. If if after all this you don't feel comfortable with this, I hope to hear from you soon, perhaps by the end of May, but I will refund your money if you don't feel comfortable. And so he acknowledged their anxiety for some of them. And he also talked about some of the things that they could do at his home, and the accessibility of the beaches and a pond and kayaking and all that, to make them feel that, even though this isn't going to be a normal summer, they can have a good time at his home. And so he sent it out to all of his guests, and the first one back early this morning was from someone who is a healthcare provider herself, and someone who is really anxious to take a vacation. And she said, I feel so much better now. I will feel so much more comfortable, and thank you so much. And I think it goes a long way to connect with your guests and make them realize that you have their concerns at heart, and you're going to do everything you can to provide a clean, disinfected home that they can feel comfortable staying in for a week or more.
Right, and I think there are the expectations. Vacationers, your guests are going to have the expectation that there are going to be some sacrifices or some changes. This is the new normal for this summer, at least, and so there's going to be some differences there. And most people are okay with that, understanding that things are going to be a little bit different. So as Joan mentioned before, maybe there's going to be a longer time in between stays, for turnovers. And if that's what it takes to ensure the safety of my stay as a guest, I'm comfortable with that. But the main thing goes back to the communication, that you ensure that you're communicating with the guests. Don't drop this on them right before they are set to arrive. If you're establishing that relationship, which you already have with your book guests, communicate kind of what your changes are and ensure that they feel safe coming. I think with that, I think we should talk about kind of what are some of those things? What are some of those adjustments that we recommend and that homeowners are recommending now for their homes to ensure their safety? So it comes into kind of the cleaning strategies that people have, or the turnover strategies. Maybe I think the first thing to talk about, and I've seen, I can't read all these comments, but I'm seeing a lot of chatter just about kind of the cleaning products and the turnover timing and so forth, is kind of what are going to be the standards? What are the new standards that hosts need to abide by for all their turnovers besides the timing? And if you use a cleaning company, what standards are they're going to have to abide by those same standards? What we've seen, what we've heard is that there are recommendations now about cleaning standards from the CDC, and there's also recommendations on products to use. I think the EPA has some recommendations on the products that can be used. What we do believe that will come out from, there'll be yet more guidelines from this. From the Department of Public Health, there'll be more guidelines for what is required for the turnover process. I think what we've been talking about in the We Need a Vacation office is we're planning to put together a template, a checklist, if you will, a checklist that would provide a summary of what's in all the guidelines that is needed to ensure a turnover has been completed. And we think that along the lines of what Joan was talking about the assurance to a vacationer, it'd be nice to have that checklist and make it available for each one of your guests. You could have that checklist and show them, here's the checklist that we're going to go through before you come. And then also upon arrival, to be able to see that checklist. Maybe it's a process that you put in place that if you do the cleaning yourself, or you have a cleaner that does it, that they sign off on that checklist and say, this checklist was done, it was completed at this time. So they know, and they walk in, again, it's another piece of assurance. They walk in, they see this has been cleaned, they have left at X time. And it's just, so those are puts kind of some pieces in place to follow, so that, I mean, we don't want everybody following different rules again, and the uncertainty of what's going to be required. With that though, Joan, what do you recommend to help with the turnover process? And we talked about decluttering a little bit, and so we can talk, what sort of recommendations do you have for hosts this year to help with that turnover process?
Well, some decluttering certainly, because let's just start with every summer, the preponderance of complaints and negative reviews, hate to even bring up negative guest reviews, but are about lack of cleanliness. And if somebody walks into your home and they don't think it's clean, they'll certainly not think it's disinfected. And the best way to just provide a clean, almost like hotel-like home is to get rid of some of, just remove some of the articles, the clutter, so that the cleaning person, or you, I mean, in some cases it's the homeowner who's doing the cleaning and disinfecting, can easily clean. Otherwise, it just makes it very difficult. So that's some homeowners are even going to the extent of removing pillow shams, dust ruffles, decorative pillows. You don't have to, but some people feel more comfortable and feel that their guests might feel more comfortable doing that. The other thing is supplying materials for them. Cleaning, it's really important. Every year I get, we hear from vacationers who say, well, they didn't even leave anything for us to do any cleaning with while we were there. That's going to be essential, to leave some cleaning products and gloves and paper towels and just the things that they could use to clean. And just to underscore what Jim said about that checklist, vacationers going into your home are not, without that checklist, they are not going to really know what you did. And so some of them who are a little more skittish and apprehensive than others are going to feel like, well, I've got to go around with this Lysol and clean again, just in case, because I don't know what they did. So it's really important to do that and to provide for them guidelines along with all the other guidelines that you provide for them on a normal basis.
And don't like, get us wrong in terms of, there's also the expectation, what's a vacationer going to do as they walk into a home? Some vacationers, many vacationers are going to be a little nervous walking into a new place. And so they are going to take it upon themselves to some degree. They shouldn't be held responsible for it, but you do imagine that vacationers want to have that reassurance. They're going to walk in. I know I would walk into a place, I would likely wipe down some things as well, just even if I had that reassurance. The vacationers are going to, I think we're all well averse at what the social distancing and cleaning products are required in our own homes today. We're likely going to bring that and try to be well averse of what's required wherever you're staying at the moment. So having those products available for them to help clean throughout their stay also helps them with just ensuring a good experience while they're there. They don't have to worry about, just one less thing to worry about, I guess.
The linens are another factor here, and of concern to a lot of homeowners. Some homeowners who often provide the linens are not providing them this year and asking their guests to bring their own or rent them from a linen rental company. But I have read in several places recently infectious disease doctors saying that it's not so much the linens that might shed virus. That obviously they would be clean and laundered in hottest water possible, but it's the person putting the linens on the bed, so who might cough or sneeze or have a virus, but a long shot, but possibility. And so the answer to that would be put the linens and have someone put the linens on the end of each bed or in a closet, and have your guest do that and make up their beds on their own. They might feel more comfortable with that anyway.
Yeah, that's a great point on the, in years past, we often say, what a great feeling it is to walk into a house and you're on vacation. The very first thing is you don't want to be making your bed as your first step, or you don't want to be wiping down the counters again as your first step. This year is different. And if it means I feel safer and I have to bring my own sheets and make my own bed, but I know that's part of the safety protocols, that would be okay for the guests. So I think it comes down to, do what's right for the guest, or what's right, and if you've had that communication process in place to understand what they're comfortable with, you're not going to kind of mismatch expectations for when they arrive. All right, any other suggestions on the cleaning front, on the turnover front, Joan? The supplies. There was a question on the supplies. I mean, it's hard. Everyone, no matter where you are, I'm sure you've had runs on certain products. So what we were talking about is plan ahead. Start planning now for what you need for the entire summer. Mm-hmm. But in terms of where to get the supplies, that's a tough one for us to answer. It kind of depends on where you live. Joan, any recommendations there on?
Well, you're fortunate if you have a place where these supplies can be kept, and a running supply for the whole summer. Not everyone does, but if you do, just stock up, and your cleaner can restock each time. But I do think it's important to supply those items, and if you can start stocking up now to do that, that's ideal.
Just to summarize, some of this is, and again, seeing the information here, we'll gather some of the resources, in terms of, for example, the best products to use, or products that are approved for disinfecting. We're not the experts on that, but we do have resources that I've seen a reference to that. I think we will summarize this information, put these references out again, on our blog and in a summary email with the video of this meeting afterwards. In terms of the checklist that would help in the turnover process, we're working on that. It is dependent on the guidelines that come forth from the subcommittee. So we'll be working on that checklist, but we really have to wait till we get the full guidance from the subcommittees to put that in place.
I know that some people, in terms of, again, in terms of the linens and towels and blankets, especially anything for the bed, if you have extras for the beds, and you can have your cleaning staff or whoever is in there responsible for the bedding, if they could switch it out in between, and that would be great. Or if I saw someone mention that, you know, he'd asked his guests to throw the blankets into the dryer. You know, it's so individual, because not everyone has the same capability. Some people have very large houses. It just sometimes it's just unwieldy and difficult to do all of that. So you really have to just gauge it by what works best for you.
You mentioned leaving, you know, throwing the blankets in the dryer. I mean, it's okay to leave stuff. I mean, it's almost reassurance that it's been done. If something's left in the dryer, something that, you know, a dishwasher's been loaded but not unloaded, you know, it shows that it's been clean, right? I mean, those are things that you can consider as part of your cleaning process checkout, is to just load the dishwasher, let it run, and walk out. Is that something that you have suggested or used for the turnover process?
Usually my cleaning person will go in and empty the dishwasher. So I don't know, I have to think about that, whether, you know, do I want my guests to know that but, you know, they're only using some of them. And so what about all those that are left in the cabinet? I just think that it's highly unlikely that, you know, someone is going to get the virus from a pot in the, you know, in the cupboard, or I just think that there's just so much you can do to make sure that your house is sanitized and disinfected. And you know, people have been sending us all kinds of companies and products. One person yesterday mentioned UV lighting that are used in hospital settings, nursing homes, hotels even, but it's expensive, and I just don't know that an individual homeowner would be able to do that. Someone else suggested sprayers. There's a company that will come in and you know, in hazmat suits and spray the house with disinfectants. Again, it's very expensive. One of them that I saw just today, it would cost 25 cents a square foot. So for the average 2,500 square foot house, it would be about $625 just to do that. You know, is that overkill, so to speak? And then there was the foggers. There are people have mentioned foggers. Those are difficult to obtain at this point, and the disinfectant is really hard to get too. So there are so many products, companies out there that can do this kind of job, but I just think we have to think practicality here, and it just doesn't seem. I think there are a lot of products, just household products that, you know, that you can use and that your cleaners will use to do the job, the high touch areas, and I think you could do a you know, perfectly adequate job.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a lot of comments in here, just recommendation, you know, there's again the links to the CDC, but also folks commenting on you know, where you might be able to get some of those materials. I think you know, we were talking about in the office how there might be availability of disinfectants, Lysol and whatnot at one location, but it's here today, gone tomorrow. So you have to, I think that's where some of these boards come, the community Facebook group, you know, if you're living in the same area and you see that a product's available, you know, always post a question is, you know, where have you gotten the products, and see if you can find where they are and just kind of crowdsource the availability of products where they're finding it. Because again, it's at the moment, some of these things are hard to find. But again, the recommendation, just, you know, we have to start planning to see, to make sure that you do have the necessary cleaning products available for you. Marketing, just for sake of time here, just Joan, marketing tips for the listing. You know, if the rental ban comes up, you know, what would you highlight? What sort of changes might you recommend for your listing?
Well, first of all, post an owner special if you'd like to. Many people are posting an owner special if they have many weeks available and would love a 32+ day rental or more. Or just many people are putting something about their cleaning procedure and just mention that. In most cases in the property description. Some of them are just starting their property description off with a brief paragraph that, you know, acknowledging the issues and providing the reassurance that their home is going to be, you know, adequately disinfected. But I think on the positive side, I think that what homeowners should do is highlight those features of their home and their setting that will attract people during this time, especially if you are within walking distance to a beach, you're near a pond where there's likely to be fewer people, you're near a bike trail, hiking, any of those activities, highlight those, because those are the things that vacationers are going to be looking for at your home, and they may not have even been to your town before. So if you highlight those and attract people, you know, to your home because of the ability for them to take part in these activities and still socially isolate, it's you know, that's to your advantage. And particularly beaches, if you either have a pass for the beach or your guests can walk to the beach. That's a huge benefit to you at this point. Well, and the other thing, of course, our advantage of homes over hotels is that, you know, you have a deck or a patio or a porch where people can, you know, they can grill and bring their food and dine outside and all those things that every vacationer likes to do every year, but this year even more so. It's even more pronounced that their ability to feel like they are safe and secure in this home for a week or more, and they can enjoy it with their family and not really have to worry about, you know, being in a crowd or you know, in a hotel-like setting where, you know, there are communal activities.
Agree with all of that, and I think for time here, Joan, anything else to add before we look to wrap things up for today?
Just one more thing to when you are communicating with your guests, you should feel prepared to give them ideas about grocery stores that might deliver and take out, restaurants where you can do takeout, and places where you can get seafood. Homeowners don't always do that, and I think this year, again, it's more important than ever. But, you know, we do think there's going to be a summer, and it won't be, you know, it won't be as the normal summer, to be sure, But we think that when the governor finally announces the date of opening, which we hope will be June 8th, we think that there will be a huge pent-up demand, and we expect our inquiries to really accelerate after that, with people who are just waiting for that. They just don't trust it yet. And so be ready. And